Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the case of Scott Peterson and what all happened around that. Let's go ahead and begin. Now, Duping Delight is quite literally this mindset of glee because you have the power over the person you're lying to. Regardless, he does not like the fact that people are pointing fingers at him. If I saw all of this in a cluster like this, I would want to push harder there. I would want to ask more questions to really decipher if that was being genuine. After all of this little segment here, I really don't think his wife was nearly as okay with it as he's trying to push it. I think she was quite upset. This doesn't look good for Scott during this time because that can be pretty incriminating for him.
And that's at peace with it, not happy about it.
This is another oddity in his baseline. He's holding very, very strong eye contact with Diane during this time. And it's abnormal throughout the rest of the interview and actually the rest of the footage that I compiled of Scott. This really, really strong, heavy, relentless gaze is kind of odd. This can be a sign of deceit. It's not a guaranteed sign of deceit, but considering everything else that we just learned about him through his nonverbal communication, chances are it really is a sign of deceit.
Why did you tell her?
It was the right thing.
Because again, you know that people sitting at home.
He said it was the right thing. He shook his head no, and the corner of his mouth was pulled down in this expression here. That doesn't lend towards his innocence in this sort of situation. It doesn't lend towards his side of the story on this. I don't feel like any of this entire area is how it actually happened. I feel like he's lying during this entire subject area.
Have imagined that either you were in love with someone else, therefore you decided to get rid of this entanglement, namely your wife and your child. Or there was just an angry confrontation.
Neither of those was the case.
This is odd, because when he says this time neither of those was the case, that seems to be true. His body language is aligned with his words. He does a blink in there, but it seems to be a normal length blink. Everything seems to be synchronized there. So this could be either one, he's telling the truth and everything else that we just saw and we're able to kind of decipher is inaccurate, or this time he was just able to tell a fairly convincing lie. Chances are, if we're just basing it off of probabilities alone, the larger amount is probably true, the smaller amount is probably false. So, at this point he was probably lying.
It's that simple.
He insisted all was well between him and Lacey.
Tell me about the state of your marriage. What kind of marriage was it?
God, I mean, the first word that comes to mind is, glorious. I mean, we took care of each other.
That's a question for me, just thinking about the whole scenario itself. He's cheating on his wife. I don't think that if he's cheating on his wife, the relationship is glorious, but he does something that is very common in actual genuine recollection, and that's that squint of the eyes. You can see it just lightly as he's looking down into the side. He's squinting and he's recollecting. That's a genuine expression of recollection. This has been largely proven by some researchers at the University of Rochester as they've been trying to gather expressions of people who are lying or who are experiencing various emotions and feeding it to AI so that the AI can find patterns. They're not giving any extra information to the AI. It's simply a pattern finding AI system. And oddly enough, this expression of squinting of the eyes, regardless of where you're looking. We're not buying into the directional eye cues. We're simply talking about the expression of the eyelids themselves. When it's squinting, it seems to be, on average, that people are recollecting genuinely during those times. So that's odd. in my opinion, that he's doing that expression of possible genuine recollection, and then he produces this word of glorious? It doesn't seem plausible to me. Something seems off. We have to keep watching. Maybe that will unveil itself throughout the rest of the interview.
Very well. She was amazing. He is amazing.
When Scott Peterson's parents and other family members
Does a few eyebrow raises, and he has a small partial smile in there as well. So far, I'm finding a weird mixture between this deceitful side of things from Scott and this genuine side of things from Scott. It's pretty muddy right now. I have to keep watching.
joined the interview, they said their faith in his innocence never wavered, even though they were surprised about the affair.
Susan, what was your reaction when you heard?
I was very shocked, to be quite honest. It's not in Scott's character.
And when you hear people now out in the country say, did he do it? What do you want to say to them?
This is odd. This isn't Scott, this is his mom. But when Diane says there's people asking, did he do it? And his mom starts nodding yes, is this in saying yes, they are asking that? Or is she suspicious of her son? It's an important question and doesn't really look good for the face of Scott on this, just even if your mom might possibly believe that you did it. That's pretty awkward for Scott. But I saw that and wanted to make note of that just because it seems odd non-verbally in that place.
He couldn't have if
Possible.
it's impossible. If he knew Scott, he's the gentlest soul I think I've ever known.
That wasn't true from the dad. The entire time he's shaking his head. At first it was aligned with the it's impossible. Impossible, shaking head, no, makes sense. But then he continues on and he says Scott's the gentlest soul that he has ever known, but he also throws a I think in there, and it just really undermines the entire statement, which that means that his dad didn't fully buy what his dad was saying. His dad didn't believe himself on that, so why would we bother believing him on that? That means that there's more to Scott than what his dad is saying, which means that there could be that side of Scott that is this dark monster the courts kind of found him to be.
The police interviewed Scott Peterson 3 times, but after he got a lawyer, he did not talk to them again. His house was searched twice, and more questions about his behavior began to surface.
A neighbor says that the first thing that Lacey did every morning was pull open the curtains. But this morning, they were never pulled open.
Yeah, they were down when I returned. It's very common in the summer that she opens up the curtains.
Speaking on the question itself, this has nothing to do with anything. Sure, there are definitely people that have routines. For instance, me and my wife, every single morning, I wake up and I make coffee and I open the curtains. That's every single morning. I can actually personally recount a couple times in the past several months that I didn't do that. And believe it or not, nobody was murdered that day. It just didn't happen. Sometimes oddities happen in routines. It's not that big a deal. Absolutely not that big a deal. Didn't even think about it. And then by the time I thought about it, didn't feel like doing it. And my wife didn't care enough, so it just didn't happen. That doesn't mean anything sinister. And his response to it is adequate. There's nothing that seems to be deceitful around that. Once again, there's a lot of the eye blocking that I've just seen again and again and again. And it's extremely odd to me how much there is. But in its quantity, that could indicate that it's just a part of his baseline, is this prolonged eye blocking.
But again, we're talking about a day that, I don't know what it was, probably 40 degrees that day or something.
Little flash of a contempt mouth shrug there. So a mouth shrug is just, I don't know. That's quite literally what a mouth shrug is. It's a nonverbal statement of uncertainty. So that makes sense. But the contempt in there as well, perhaps it is towards the ridiculousness of the question itself. Is it really worth anybody's time to note that the curtains weren't open? He could see it as not, so that would be where that contempt slips in. So it's an odd flash of an expression, and those are the emotions that are usually tied to it. It's just a matter of finding what the reason for those emotions are.
And during the winter, we don't open the curtains to keep the house warm.
Nothing to that. Nothing suspicious.
No, I mean, certainly I wish if something had happened to her in the house, I wish they'd been open so someone.
This is odd. This is just odd non-verbally. And Scott does just have a lot of odd non-verbal patterns. But he says that no, there's nothing odd about it. And he does another mouth shrug. This is also mirroring the I don't know, I don't think so. But then he does a really heavy eye block. And then he opens his eyes really wide and intensely. And it's like, okay, just take a chill for a second. This is odd. This is a spike in his nonverbal communication. This kind of intensity doesn't show up anywhere. Makes me ask why. Why does this intensity show up now where it hasn't shown up anywhere else? And it could be an overcompensation. It could be something to where he was like,
no, I wish that somebody, I hope they were open. Just please don't suspect me of this. Because see, I'm hoping really intensely that the windows were open so that people could see.
It almost feels like that overcompensation. Regardless, it's something that I've made note of and I can keep track of as I continue the rest of the read.
Maybe been able to stop it, but in the winter, who opens their curtains for the draft?
Another little partial shrug there, looking down. It's still reaffirming the words that he's saying. He's saying that he doesn't know. Why would somebody do this? And his body language is also saying he doesn't know as well. This is a good example of synchronized body language.
Another story that is out there is that the kitchen was spotless.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there was still a wet mop around, which indicated somebody had cleaned something very recently.
Lacey was mopping the floors when I left that morning. Yes, the house is spotless. She had a cleaning lady on Monday.
So during that time, once again, his heavy eye blocking pops up. I know that I keep bringing this up, and it's just so prevalent that it's almost making it to where it's irrelevant. It's unreliable because of all of the odd points that it's popping up. Either one, all of these points mean something because of the eye block, or the eye block doesn't mean as much because it's on all of these points. And since it's been on points that are trivial and points that are pretty important, I feel like it's becoming more and more of a baseline pattern rather than an oddity, be it a positive spike from said baseline.
The 23rd.
So if the cleaning lady had been there, why have to clean again?
Dog, 2 cats, muddy backyard. She mopped those floors every day.
So this one, you could see a little bit of a smile of contempt come into his face here. And when you see somebody who expresses contempt like this, that is a feeling of moral or psychological superiority over the other person. So during this answer, he has such a good answer that he knows it. He feels that he knows that he had a great, solid answer for that, which it is. If you haven't owned pets and have a backyard that can get muddy, the kitchen can be very, very dirty, and that can bother a lot of people, which would make sense if he's saying that she cleans the floors basically every day. That's really not out of the ordinary if they have pets like that. And he kind of knew that his answer was a pretty strong answer in regards to that, and it shows up on his face in this smile of contempt.
And I emptied the bucket when I returned that afternoon.
There was one report that a neighbor had seen you loading something into a vehicle?
I haven't seen that report.
Did you load anything into a vehicle? Anything large?
Some umbrellas, some market umbrellas. Those are those, the umbrellas on the stands that are 8 feet in diameter or something like that.
Quick answer again, no contempt during this time. But Diane is doing a very intentional interview method where she asks a question and then she just sits quietly. And she'll sit quietly until Scott fills that blank dead space with words, hopefully information, more telling information. This is a sign of just a trained interrogator or interviewer, and it's showing up here pretty prevalently. But Scott doesn't offer any needless details during this. He simply offers the information that you would need to know to clarify. And that's good. If he had been adding just way too many frivolous details, like perhaps the color of the umbrellas, or how they were wrapped up, or how hard it was to get them into the truck, or things like that, those are needless details that Diane frankly doesn't need to know. But instead, he just says what kind and size of umbrellas he was loading into the truck that morning. And this is a sign of authenticity. It's not a guarantee that he's being authentic, but it is pushing towards that direction.
When did you do that?
That morning.
If all these actions seem suspicious, they're still circumstantial.
I want to go back to a couple of other questions people have. I've heard so many people say, Christmas Eve, you have a very pregnant wife, and you decide to go fishing?
Mm-hmm.
What does that say about the two of you?
Well, we had plans that evening with Mom, Lacey's mom, over at her house. Frankly, Christmas preparations were done.
Another burst of odd nonverbal energy at this point, and that pushes me towards, once again, the direction of possible deceit. The other places that this has shown up has indicated deceit. And we also know that from earlier on in the interview, we've kind of established that maybe that relationship wasn't as strong and as healthy as he's trying to say it is. So there could be that aspect of that dynamic on this day. Maybe they're not doing super well, and he's like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna go fishing, because he's not getting along well with his wife. That could explain that oddity as well.
What did you got her for Christmas?
Oh, a Louis Vuitton wallet. But
so many lip compressions here. Does he regret this? That's what it's pushing me to believe, is that he regrets maybe spending that money on a Louis Vuitton wallet. Those lip compressions right after that, that's a sign of regret. In this specific instance, it would be seen as a sign of regret. He's biting back the negative emotions centered around that. It makes sense for it to be a feeling of regret around that specific purchase.
preparations were made. Her plan for the day was to prepare gingerbread cookies. My day was open to either play golf or go fishing. I chose fishing that day, which is, a choice I made, and I obviously regret now, if I could.
So he actually brings this up in his initial interrogation footage as well, that he had the choice between going golf and going fishing, and because of the weather, he felt that it was too cold to go golfing, so he went fishing. So that's continuity between stories there. That's good indication for a lack of deceit, but that doesn't clear him totally on this.
Just decided to stay home. This would not have happened.
I noticed during the interview he had not yet talked about something.
You haven't mentioned your son.
It's so hard.
That part I don't buy as much. It's like he feels that he should slide into a sad emotion there, and then he slides into a sad emotion. Before that, it's just pretty blank, pretty neutral in his face, and then it shifts into it. Not that it feels like it's coming up from within, it just feels more like it's a shift. And that would lead me to believe, and this is far from concrete, it just leads me to believe that maybe he wasn't as interested in having a kid as his wife was. He could still be sad, but it would explain why the son wasn't that prevalent in his mind during this interview.
Their baby boy was due on February 16th.
Tell me about the nursery.
Can't go in there. The door is closed until there's someone to put in there. But it's ready.
So during this time, it does seem as though he is showing genuine grief. He's doing lip compressions. He's closing his eyes, things that you would normally see in a classic cluster of sadness or grief. He does this smile again, which he did prior, where it feels like he might be smiling through the pain. And that's what led me to believe it the first time, is that there is a little bit of oddity between his smile and his eyes. So I feel like that might be a response of Scott's, is to try to smile during uncomfortable situations.
Throughout the interview, he insisted he was innocent.
Are you afraid police will arrest you?
No. I know there's no basis. I mean, I had nothing to do with their disappearance. So there's no possible evidence or anything like that.
Have they given you reason to think that you're their prime suspect?
Yeah, I mean, with with the search warrants for the cars and things like that, certainly. With a search warrant for the home, when it gets specific to a car, obviously they're looking at me.
Okay, that wraps up this video. Let's do a little bit of a summary of just what I was able to gather from this entire thing. Non-verbally speaking, Scott has some over-the-top oddities. He has some non-verbal patterns that strike me as different or strange, and that is taking into consideration all of the research that I did outside of this little blip that you got to see here. He does have odd non-verbal patterns. Now, something that could be important to note is that he was a salesman. That's his profession. And oftentimes, salespeople have to be able to maintain a certain level of calm, collected composure in order to pull through on sales, maintain control of conversations, and not give away anything to the prospective buyers. So that would make sense in that front, is that he would have a little bit more control of his emotional state and the way he presents himself, just out of necessity. But that doesn't really excuse all of the other nonverbal things. However, I would say this: there simply wasn't enough conclusive evidence for me to be able to say that he was guilty or not guilty. At this point, I can say with a fair bit of certainty that his relationship with his wife was far from good. It was not a glorious heavenly experience like he was saying. It was pretty bad all the way around, and his nonverbal communication really helped solidify that. Did he kill his wife? I can't say right now. I don't know. I don't have enough information. But I do have enough information to say that he did not get along well with his wife. And was it maybe centered around the kid? I don't know. It wasn't centered around his mistress. I don't know. There's just so many aspects that I don't know. I know that a lot of you were probably anticipating me having a solid verdict by the end of this, and even giving my honest opinion as best as I can with the information that I've gathered. I just simply don't have enough. I don't have enough data to be able to give you the answer you want to see. I've tried to give you everything that I can. I've given you the information that I can from what I've read, and it's going to be more up to you and any further developments in the case itself to be able to decipher whether or not Scott was genuinely guilty. If we're going off of probabilities and statistics, yeah, he probably did the crime himself. And also based off of the nonverbal evidence with him not having a great relationship with his wife, considering his lack of favor towards his son, and also having a mistress as well. So that does lend towards his guilt, and that is very understandable. But just based off of the nonverbal read that we did here today, there is simply not enough information. Would you like me to be able to continue researching this case, though? Is this satisfactory for you, or do you want me to dig more, find more footage, do more episodes on this? I'm happy to. I love doing this research. Or would you rather me go ahead and head on to somebody else? A big question that everybody has been having is in regards to Stephen Avery. I'm very excited to take a look at his case as well. But would you rather me focus more here on Scott or move on to Stephen? Let me know in the comments below. If you did like this video, consider hitting the like button. Also subscribe if you would like to see more. Hit the bell if you would like to see them sooner. Like I said, if you would like to make more true crime content possible, consider following the links in the description below. They all help. They're all very, very useful. This video was made largely possible by my patrons this month. I cannot express enough gratitude for you. I really appreciate everything that you've done for me. And if you would like to be able to join, one of you who aren't patrons, but you would like to be able to join, I am trying to make more content available over there. I'm a little restricted as far as my timing goes right now, but in the future, I really want to ramp up patron-specific content, just so that you can have a little bit of benefits to it. I don't know. I hope that makes sense to you. But please let me know who else you would like me to analyze in the future in the comments below. I will hold polls to decipher the most popular one as well. But, without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.